The story begins with Roz, a young and beautiful girl who worked in a big mansion. This mansion had several different sections. One part held insane inmates, another part was like an orphanage run by nuns, and another area was for the servants. All of these people lived under the care of Priest Raven. Only those inmates who were a little crazy were kept here, and Roz was responsible for washing their clothes. Among the inmates was Norman, a prisoner who was also a famous writer. Norman wrote dirty stories, which is why he was kept here, to keep him away from others. Dirty stories couldn't reach people back then because writing stuff like that was considered a crime. One day, when Roz comes to pick up Norman's clothes, he sneaks his story in with them so she can get it out into the world. Roz secretly gives the story to a publisher, who then prints and sells it. The books sold like hotcakes because everyone loved Norman's stories. They lit a fire in people's hearts and minds. Soon enough, Norman's story even reached the king, and he was furious. The king orders to kill Norman, but when the king's ministers hear this, they try to explain that if they kill him, Norman will become a hero in the eyes of the people because he's a famous writer. So, they advise the king instead to get Norman treated by Dr. William so that he stops writing altogether. Dr. William was a ruthless doctor. He used to torture his patients under the pretense of treatment and enjoyed their suffering. Meanwhile, Priest Raven was teaching Rose how to read and write. Rose secretly loved Raven, and he too felt the same love for her. They felt it, but no matter how much they wanted, they couldn't be won. Night would fall soon, and Roz would start reading Norman's book aloud to her friends every day. Roz really loved Norman's stories. She read them with great enthusiasm. Meanwhile, as Roz's friends listened, they'd get all fired up and start causing a ruckus right there, because Norman's book was just that spicy. A few days later, when Roz went to give Norman some clothes, he asked her to come inside. Once inside the room, Roz first handed Norman the money earned from his book and then told him that, "Your book has become really popular, and the publisher wants you to write more." Hearing this, Norman says, "I've written one story, but I'll only give it to you if you kiss me for every page." Rose was determined to get Norman's story published, so she agrees. But Norman starts using the kissing as an excuse to get close to her, which makes Rose angry. She ends up snatching the story from him and starts yelling at him. Raven overhears their argument and comes in, and then Rose. She slips away secretly. Now, Raven starts feeling inspired to write to Norman. Actually, Raven thought that if Norman wrote about his physical desires, one day he'd clear his mind. But he didn't know that Norman was not only writing, but also getting his book published, and every day Raven was helping him with it. Soon, Dr. William comes to see Raven. He tells her that the king has given him the responsibility of Norman's treatment. After talking to William, Raven finds out about the stories Norman has written. The articles are getting published, and knowing this makes Raven really angry at Norman. But even then, he tells William that he'll talk to Norman about it. Actually, Raven knew William well enough to understand what kind of treatment he gives, so he wanted to protect Norman from him. Raven rushes over to Norman and gets mad at him, saying that if he publishes anything else, it won't end well. Meanwhile, William had taken a liking to an orphan girl named Mary and married her, bringing her home. Mary was about the same age as William's daughter, and as night fell, William forcefully shoved his sugar cane into her cave. Within a few days, the whole town was buzzing like wildfire that William had married a girl half his age. Before long, even Norman caught wind of it, and imagining Mary's situation, he started writing a play where his crazy friends were the actors. Everyone got busy, making a big fuss preparing for the play, and invited lots of people to watch. William showed up too, bringing Mary along, when the story of William and Mary unfolded on stage. When it started showing, William got angry, but Mary was having a blast watching it. The play was about how old William would crash into Mary's cave. Everyone was happy watching the play. Rose was watching everything from behind the curtain, and meanwhile, a crazy prisoner grabs her because Norman's play had stirred up his lust. To save herself, Rose slaps the man across the face. After that, everyone finds out about the incident. Seeing all this, William even gets mad at Raven because he thinks. So it turned out that everything happened because of Norman. Now Raven goes to Norman and snatches away his pen and paper. A few days later, Norman's wife, Livia, comes to see him. Norman hadn't written anything for days, so he was really angry and started taking his frustration out on his wife. What Norman did that day hurt Livia a lot, so she goes to William and asks him to help treat Norman. The treatment was going to be expensive, so Livia gives William all the money earned from Norman's book so that she could fix her husband, while Norman was busy discovering new ways to write. Whenever he was given chicken and wine to eat, he used the chicken bones as his pen and the wine as his ink. He didn't even have any paper, so he wrote the whole story on his bedsheet. The next day, Rose found the sheet and started copying the whole story onto paper. Rose lived with her mother, who was visually impaired. Rose would tell her Norman's story too, and her mother would be happy listening to it. Before long, the story got published, and when Raven heard about it, he had all of Norman's stuff taken out of his room so that he couldn't write anything even if he wanted to. Actually, Raven was doing all this to protect Norman from Jalad Williams' treatment, but Norman just didn't get it. Even after everything, Norman's obsession with writing didn't die down. Now, he'd write the whole story on his clothes with his own blood. Every time Rose saw this obsession, she felt really happy and would start kissing him out of joy. One day, as Rose was leaving Norman's room, a girl spotted her and hurried off towards William. She goes and tells him everything, that Rose is the one helping Norman. Meanwhile, Norman was showing everyone his story, and everyone was amazed at the new ways he was writing. But Raven, getting angry, strips all his clothes off. The next morning, on William's orders, Rose starts getting whipped in front of everyone because she was helping Norman. As soon as Raven notices her, he stops them and tells them to whip him instead. He says it's all his fault, so he should be the one punished. But William couldn't punish a priest today. After the incident, Ravan decided to send Rose away from here. One night, while Rose was sleeping with her mother, she sneaks into Ravan's room and tells him, "I don't want to go away from here. I love you so much." Rose wanted to be in Ravan's arms, but Ravan quickly pulled himself together and pushed her away. The truth was, Ravan also loved Rose deeply, but since he was a priest, he couldn't accept his feelings for her. Meanwhile, Mary was also a huge fan of Norman, reading his stories, Mary's Cave. A storm would break out whenever William couldn't quench her thirst, so Mary started an affair with one of the servants in the house. Both of them caused chaos using every method Norman had written about. One day, when William was away from home, Mary wrote a letter and ran off with the servant. William found Norman's book on Mary's bed, and seeing that, he began blaming Norman for everything. Meanwhile, Roz kept telling Norman that Raven was going to send her away from here, so she wanted to read his story one last time. Norman wanted to write, but there was nothing nearby, so these guys come up with a plan. According to their plan, Norman tells a story to the crazy guy next door, and then he tells the next person, and so on. This way, the story reaches Rose, who's sitting in her room writing it down. But when the story mentions fire, one of the crazy guys actually sets his room on fire. The fire spreads everywhere, and everyone starts running away. Meanwhile, the guy who had tried to loot Rose's cave before sees his chance and grabs her again. Then that bastard starts blowing up her cave. Rose's. William had heard the screams, but that bastard didn't do anything. But when Raven started hearing Rose's screams every day, he began looking for her. However, he was too late because Rose was already dead. Now, angry over Rose's death, Raven wanted to punish Norman. In a fit of rage, he cuts out his tongue, and Norman dies writhing in pain. The story jumps to a year later. William is now running the whole asylum, and a new priest has taken Raven's place because Raven went insane from the shock of Rose's death. Now, just like Norman, he wanted to share the story with people, but William wouldn't let him, and that's how this story ends.